he was asking me, what have you been exposed to? What sort of chemicals have you been around, or, anything? And I'm just racking my brain. I'm like, I honestly live a really clean lifestyle. Hi there, it's Melissa again, the creator and founder of thepureappeal.com. And I am continuing my story that I started in part 1. You can watch that first. Sort of my health journey and where I've gotten to where I'm at today and how I am healing myself naturally using alternative treatments. So to catch up where I was at, I had gone to the hospital several times, stayed in the hospital, did a bunch of tests. Now I'm waiting for my bone marrow biopsy results and my skin biopsy results. So my bone marrow biopsy came back, and when I went to the appointment, the doctor was kind of hesitant to give me a diagnosis because what it looked like was what he said was called myelodysplastic syndrome, which MDS for short. It's typically found in people who are older, 50 or 60 or above. And it's also found in people who have had previous chemotherapy or radiation if they had a previous cancer. For example, if they had breast cancer and they went through radiation or chemotherapy, the chances of developing MDS or even leukemia is a lot higher. I think the percentages were like, I don't know, they were like 70 or above. It was a really high percentage that you can develop blood or bone marrow cancer because of the crazy chemical exposures. So, he was asking me, what have you been exposed to? What sort of chemicals have you been around, or, anything? And I'm just racking my brain. I'm like, I honestly live a really clean lifestyle. I don't use products that have chemicals as far as my skincare, my cleaning, makeup. I've sort of overhauled my life within the past, I don't know, I'd say 5 to 7 years. It's been a progression of just getting rid of toxins that are around me. So, honestly, I was like, I haven't been exposed to anything. I couldn't think of anything that, unless there's something in the, the air around where I live or in my house or something, I couldn't pinpoint it. So he wasn't convinced that it was MDS because of my age, because of the fact that I haven't really had any prior exposure to anything really high in chemicals or radiation. So he said, let's let the pathologist look over it a little bit more in depth and see you back in a week and see what it's all about. And at this point, I'd never heard of MDS. And he kind of was just like, well, it's like, where you have blasts in your bone marrow. And to sort of sum this up for you guys, when your bone marrow makes blood cells, they obviously make them and they're brand new cells. And then they mature to, teenage cells and then to adult cells and then eventually die off. So there's a whole cell life cycle. And in my blood, I have a lot more percentage of the smaller ones that don't progress on through the life cycle. So they kind of just stay small. And when you get into things like leukemia, where MDS is called, they refer to it sometimes as a pre-leukemia, but leukemia cells stay young and there's too many and they start to multiply and then you have a bunch of them and it just kind of clogs up your whole, system, your immune system, because you can't function with just these baby cells basically. So he said that, the blasts are there, but, he wants the pathologist to look more into it. So we reschedule for the next week. I go see the dermatologist about my skin biopsies. And he says what he found out what it is something called sweet syndrome, but it's also got a long name, acute febrile neutrophilic dermatosis. But basically it's just you get these skin eruptions or sores that they're not contagious. It's just sort of your skin reacting to something. And it can happen in women during their pregnancy. It can happen as a reaction to a drug, some sort of pharmaceutical, but it's also seen in malignancy, and it's very commonly associated with leukemia. So that's not what I wanted to hear. I definitely wanted to hear that it was like, psoriasis or folliculitis, something like they were kind of talking about, not this rare skin thing. But anyways, so he wanted to wait and see what the hematologist has to say based on my bone marrow biopsy, because that'll kind of really solidify this sweet syndrome if it is MDS, because then that makes sense, because they kind of would go hand in hand. So during the week that I kind of had my waiting period when we were waiting to hear back from the pathologist. I did more research on MDS because, like I said, I hadn't ever heard of it, didn't know anything about it. And the more I read, the more concerned I got, because basically the doctor is telling me that I have possibly cancer. Even though it's a precancerous condition, a lot of times the MDS situation can turn into leukemia, and it can turn into acute myeloid leukemia. I don't know exactly if that's how you say it, which is one of the worst kinds of leukemia that you could get. It's fast growing, I should say. So, you know, I did some research. I didn't want to scare myself, and I didn't want to put it out there that that's what I did have, but I wanted to know so that I was prepared. And during this time too, you know, everything happens for a reason, and I really truly believe that. And I had never really spent time thinking about cancer because it's never really been close in my life. No one in my family has had cancer. I haven't really experienced it or gone through it with somebody. So I didn't know too much about it, and I never paid that much attention to, you know, articles that I read, other than that I would avoid things that, you know, obviously were carcinogenic. So I had seen this post on Facebook that someone had shared about this docuseries about the truth about cancer. And it kind of sparked my interest, because I thought, well, if this is something that I'm going to have to deal with, maybe I should watch this. So I started watching the documentary, and it really opened my eyes to the idea that there's other alternative options if you do have cancer, versus going the Western medicine route of chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery. And I was thinking and listening to all these stories as I'm watching it, that, you know, these people break away from what's the norm of how you treat, you know, cancers. And a lot of them find that they're healthier, they heal themselves, and they far surpass what doctors have, you know, sort of put out there as their time, you know, their time to go or whatever. And so after watching that, I had such a greater feeling of empowerment that if I am diagnosed with this, and if it is something that I'm going to have to deal with, I have options, and there is a positive sort of venue or avenue that I can take, versus what just doesn't feel right in my gut of the chemotherapy and radiation and stuff. And my doctor had briefly said that if it was MDS, that's kind of the route that they go. So I'm gonna stop this one here because I'm still chatting a long time, and I will make a part 3 to this video. So please make sure you watch part 3, and I will keep going on with my story and tell you a little bit more about what's going on. All right, see ya.